Yeah.
There's only so much of it left, and I'm not the only one looking for it.
This season on Gold Rush.
I believe we can get 5,000 ounces in one
Bert
season.
from Metairie.
Yeah, that's how we ought to intro you. Hey, welcome to Friday's edition of Dunc and Holder. We have a very special guest, Bert from Metairie.
Season, Friday, October 13th at 9.
The look on Larry's face when the call came in.
It was so gold.
He was like, "Is that who I think it is?" Yeah, that is.
Sports 1280.
Didn't even bother listening.
Playoffs get underway Thursday with a pair of games highlighted by the dominant performance in Cleveland from Trevor Bauer.
Cleveland's still good, and the Astros are going to hit lots of home runs.
Game
What about the
2
Dodgers?
will be later on today. Early.
Hey, I had 7 interviews with the coordinators on Tuesday. I'm still transcribing. So
Oh my God!
I did not watch anything.
That's FSR affiliate KBME and the Astros radio network. New England, a 19-14 winner as they won in Tampa Bay. I'm Ralph Irvin.
It's Free Movie Friday, thanks to Adam Tickets.
And just so you know, I was telling
Adam
you
one
can
for
keep
your chance to win.
about this
That's
far away.
TOM and the number 1.
Facing you.
walk miles a day for dirty water. But together, we can end their walk by providing clean water close by. Instead of spending hours walking to get water that makes them sick, girls can be in a strong, finally free of sicknesses. It's true. When you just add water, you change a life. Learn more at world.
Complications or need a revision surgery, you may be entitled to significant financial compensation. Injuries from metal-on-metal hip implants can include metallosis, loosening of parts, pain, difficulty in walking, and other.
Versatility in an offensive lineman. And what was told to me was when they set that the 53-man roster, that's something they look at when they start looking at their backup players, who can perform more than just one position on the offensive line. The Saints, you're absolutely correct. It doesn't look as explosive as it has in years past, but when you look at the statistics.
And you're on the beat. I want to get more of your insight because you are on top of this team as well as anybody. You're out there every day, so we want to get your thoughts on this start and the fact that they're 2-2, and we'd also like to get 6'4", 1280. Anybody out there on the iHeartRadio app listening across the country or across the world for that matter, give us a call. We'd love to hear your thoughts. This is going to be a free-for-all Friday. We're going to have fun in here. I know it's Country Fried Friday. I've already made my request to Dave to try and get some jab. And we know, Herbie, the running joke today on social media before the program even aired was that we were going to talk about Game of Thrones, which I know Absolutely. I know less about Game of Thrones than I do about modern hip hop, which was the theme yesterday with Amos.
I wouldn't say yesterday was modern in any. Well,
no,
between me and Amos, you're
you
right.
and Amos,
yes.
My ignorance.
You're not up on your future.
My ignorance was exposed there, and it's going to be exposed on Game of Thrones, which is arguably the most popular show on TV. Correct. Malaysia, it's the #1 show in Malaysia.
It is the most watched show on the planet. Game of Thrones is not just the United States phenomenon. It is worldwide. This thing reaches out to.
Far derailed.
I'm curious because I have what is known as FOMO, fear of missing out. I've got a really. So what is it about the show that's so good? Because clearly, it's wildly popular. What really intrigued me was watching Hard Knocks this year. If you watched any of that, they had a little cutaway. Now I realize it's HBO, but they had and all the players during practice on the bench, they were all talking about Game of Thrones to themselves, among themselves. So it clearly is something that's reaching all manner of humanity.
And it's not just about the fantasy. Of course, dragons don't exist. To me, what is...
They don't?
Well, they might.
All right, Jeff. Okay.
I think Josh Katzenstein and I saw some form of dragon in the Thames, by the way, over the weekend.
Of course you did, because that's London.
The allure of Game of Thrones is the drama. It touches on so many areas that when you look at life itself, you're like, holy smokes, man. This is what they're... Politics. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Everything about the Game of Thrones, it just draws you in because of that. And I will say this. It took me a while to really get into it. And a good friend of the Game of Thrones.
Well, I love the Lord. It was like the first, what I consider to be novels. Are those considered novels that I ever read? The Hobbit was the first novel for sure I ever read. So if I liked Lord of the Rings, I assume I would like it.
You would absolutely love the Lord of the Rings. I mean, you would love Game of Thrones if you love Lord of the Rings.
But do I have the time to watch it?
Yes, you do.
You
can watch it. You can binge watch it. And the show's not coming back until, what, 2019? They're saying right now?
Yeah.
To get back into the final season?
Why are you guys stealing my topic? You know, I have a show called The Week in Geek, but that's at 9.
We try to suppress it so that we don't give you any publication.
People tuning in here wanting to get Saints insight, and instead they're getting Game of Thrones.
Do it.
And we will get into a new line. Hopefully we'll get into a new line of conversation here with Rick on the West Bank. What you got?
Hey, how y'all doing? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I want to throw them away, and then the next 2 weeks, I see that they look like they made the turn. Have a team at the rank 12 on defense.
It's a good question, Rick. Let's let Herbie answer that, because I think Herbie's.
When he was the defensive coordinator there, I think it was 2011, the rankings weren't like a top 15 defense, but they were a defensive coordinator. That he was installing his scheme, and the players had to learn the scheme, and then they had to deal with injuries. And what you're seeing this year is a carryover from there, where players are all of a sudden comfortable in the system, and it's starting to show. First, now he's back healthy, and then Ken Crawley, who had a year in the scheme, is really starting to show that he understands it, he grasps it, and that's what I expect to see a jump, whether it's offense or defense, and I think we're starting to see that, especially these last 2 games. You know, I always have a fond habit of saying once is a fluke, twice or more is a habit. So when you're able to have 2 straight dominant defensive performances, like the Saints had against the Carolina Panthers and the Miami Dolphins, that's definitely a sign they're going up.
And I could care less about whether in the past they didn't get either. They were ranked low, they gave up a ton of yards, and they weren't getting any sacks or takeaways. You've got to do one or the other, and the Saints right now are doing both, and it's definitely an encouraging sign. All right, let's take a break right now. We'll come back. We'll try and get hold of Chris Landry, get him on the line, get his insight into the Saints start, and also
What, Joe? The Keith Urban?
That's got to be for Jeff.
Oh yeah. All this is for Jeff. Because it wants Keith Urban. If I hear Blake Shelton, I'm gonna break it.
Y'all making me out to be some kind of.
I will come over there and grab each of you and throw you off the 32nd floor.
Sports 12.
I will kick you in the jimmy, Clyde.
For 50, listen carefully.
Clyde walked away from the mic, but I will relay that message to him.
Or where you parked your.
He said he'll kick you.
Herbie's mic is a little up.
Look,
Okay. He said he'll kick you in the Jimmy.
By age 50, the average person has lost.
Kick him in the baby, Clyde. I can't really tell in when we're off when the mics are off because the cue always sounds good, but it's when we hit the airwaves that the mics sound weird. So just be ready. We got about a minute and a half. Oh crap! I got to call Andy.
Yeah.
Just call 1-800-990-7765 to get started.
I saw myself go from forgetting people's names.
Look, man, I don't have a problem with Keith Urban, but if I hear some Blake Shelton, I'm gonna break something, dude. I'm just telling you.
Blake can sing.
Blake Shelton's awesome.
Blake Shelton, dude.
Blake's coming up next, then.
I swear,
I'm
dude.
telling you, man.
Dude.
You're doing it to yourself.
Okay, look, I'm telling you right now, if you don't play Miranda after that, I'm gonna be angry with you.
What do you took Miranda's side in the
Yes,
breakup?
absolutely. Yes, I will take her side every day.
I bet you will.
The thing that really
Does your
impresses
wife know
me,
that?
Yes, even she knows that. Yes, she is full aware.
What impresses me the most about Blake is like when you watch the Voice, and you know how the coaches come together and sing a song, and his range is amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this guy can just flat out sing.
But with iHeartRadio, you get more music, fewer interruptions, and iHeartRadio is free. Try it today. All your favorite music, all your favorite stations,
from
all
Metairie.
All right, we got Chris.
Awesome, thanks.
And 30 seconds.
Event where you'll find great deals to spruce up your great outdoors. Fall's the perfect time to focus on getting your lawn in shape, and now you can take care of it with and flowers. Now 5 pints are just $5. All projects have a starting point. Start with
Twitter
Lowe's.
needs a damn edit button.
Scott's offer
They
valid
do.
9/27 through 10/11.
Meeting out.
Plan offer valid 10/4 through 10/11. While supplies last, U.S. only.
Y'all know what I meant.
Let's go, girls.
This is Dunc and Holder on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
Welcome back, Country Fried Friday.
Shania's got a new album out.
I hear that, and it's all new songs.
Kicking it at 50, man. Boss.
Oh my gosh. Figured you to be a Shania Twain fan.
Yeah, as if you could not tell, I'm all about the country chicks. All about it.
Does your wife know this?
Yes, Jeff, I just told you
Here's
this at the
Landry.
break. Absolutely.
All right, we will get into the Country Fried Friday segment of the show in the second hour. But first, let's go to our next guest, our first guest of the day, Chris Landry, a guy I've known all the way back when I worked in Tennessee. The first couple of years the Tennessee Titans moved from Houston. My first couple of years covering the NFL. And Chris, of course, now based out of Baton Rouge, runs LandryFootball.com. If you haven't been on his site, you need to go on there. If you're a hardcore football fan, college, pros, whatever, Chris knows his stuff up and down. He used to coach at LSU under Bill Arnsparger, and, of course, has worked all over the NFL. Chris, welcome to the program. How you doing today, buddy?
Doing good, Jeff. How are you doing? Good to catch up with you again.
Yeah, everything's good, man. It's beautiful weather. We're, I guess, bracing for the storm coming through. But until then, let's talk a little football. I want to get your thoughts on what's going on down at LSU. You had a really interesting podcast this week on your site, kind of taking people and fans through, I guess, the different iterations of LSU football, going way back all the way pre-Nick Saban. And I thought it was really insightful to get the history and kind of how we got to this point with LSU football. And it seemed to me, just in listening to what you had to say, that you put a lot of this blame not necessarily on Ed Ogeron, but just it's bigger than Ed Ogeron, isn't it, Chris?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, if you certainly go on the premise that Ed Ogeron was perhaps not the right fit at LSU, why was he the head coach? Who was responsible for that decision? And the reason I did the podcast is obviously after the Troy game last week, there's been tremendous consternation in Baton Rouge and all across LSU nation as to how do we get here, and so I thought, well, you know, maybe I can answer it the best way I can to the masses, and you know, and kind of go back to how it all started and in my background with Saban when we were on Belichick's staff in Cleveland, and kind of how things have gone through the cycle and the decisions that have been made, and quite frankly, through the whole Les Miles era, where there were certainly contract negotiations left and right, and some of the quote unquote air quotes here coaching rumors of whatnot about Les leaving and what have you, and how he parlayed that, and quite frankly, I don't know a better way to phrase it, that Joe Alleva has consistently been worked over by agents that have represented his coaches, and I think that you can make the case if you believed in hiring Ed Orgeron, it's one thing, but to do it with a $12 million buyout, I don't know of a word beyond insane, but insert that there. You could have done very similar to what Missouri did. Hired Barry Odom. Not quite sure it's going to work. I thought he was in over his head. But if Missouri, and I'm not saying they will or they won't, wants to move on from Barry Odom, it's going to cost them less than $2 million to buy him out. Basically, the decisions that Joe has made has cost this university millions. Still paying Les Miles $9 million. Joe would not fire Ed, and I'm not advocating that be done. But if they were to do that, it would cost over $20 million for coaches that are not coaching. And we're not talking about the assistants that have to be paid off, and then we're not talking about who needed to be hired. So I guess the whole point of when people ask, why do you get this way, and why was it so good then, and why is it bad? Well, that's just kind of why I decided to say, oh, heck, let's just do a podcast and kind of take people through the timelines and how organizations, pro and college, can really affect the future of their programs based upon bad decisions. I've seen it at Tennessee. You mentioned you were in Tennessee, but you remember Tennessee Vols situation, and Phil Fulmer probably needed to be replaced. Definitely needed to be replaced in my mind. But bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, and to understand that just because you have a great program doesn't mean it's going to stay. Alabama, USC, Notre Dame, we've seen all great programs just flounder, and it's only just a bad decision away from going in the tank, so to speak. And so that's why I did it and pointed out a lot of those things in depth.
Well, Chris, one of the things you said during that podcast that kind of piqued my interest, and I think it's very timely right now because there's a front page story in the New York Times sports section today about LSU, and the headline of the story is, "Did Nick Saban break LSU football?" And what you said in your podcast was that Nick Saban had his eye on leaving one way or the other. Was that related to Mark Emmert's leaving? What can you take us back to that? Because I think LSU fans still feel jilted and heartbroken, but you indicated that maybe he was gone no matter what was going to happen.
Well, Mark Emmert, let's go back. Let's take folks back to when Nick and I worked together in Cleveland. One of the things that he always had concern is I was trying to sell him on the job. This, by the way, was when LSU hired Pat Sullivan. People forget that. They hired Pat Sullivan, and they didn't let the contract even dry, and they couldn't agree on the buyout, and they turned around within 24 hours and then hired Jared Donato. So back when they were in that search, I was trying to get LSU and trying to get Nick together then. That didn't work for different reasons. Podcast explains that. That'll take a little more time than I know you probably have. But the part of it was trying to convince Nick that, his question was, if LSU is such a good place, why, political problems, lack of financial commitment. Well, probably the best thing that's ever happened to LSU in the modern era in terms of the athletic department and football program was when Mark Emmert came, when Donato was the head coach. And that completely changed that whole dynamic. And when we were able to get Nick over to LSU, one of the things I told him, you're going to need a football operations center, a new place for those players to stay, because Broussard Hall was dilapidated, and a new academic center. And so Nick went in and said, I need these things. And Emmert said, done, and done. And you remember. And when Nick was there, Joe Dean, I love him, good friend, God rest his soul, Skip Bertman, they were just They were just guys that administrate the other departments because Nick had a straight line to Mark Emmert. He needed anything, he called Mark or Scott Woodard, who was needed to be done. They did it, but Nick didn't answer to anybody but Mark. And when Mark left, it was, you didn't have that person that could get things done. And LSU's biggest problem historically has been political. It's been Board of Supervisors that are more concerned about their seats on the plane and their parking passes, and than in getting the guy that is the good old boy that can ego and feeling. So once Mark left, it was to me only a matter of time. And while Nick wasn't going to leave LSU just to leave, so I don't want to make that approach it that way. But the best opportunity that came along, I knew he was going to leave time, and so yeah, it was inevitable. I think it was inevitable that he was going to the NFL anyway. Personally, knowing him as well as I, it was Terry that Terry was pulling from the inside, and Mal Moore, God rest his soul, love him. He was pulling from the outside, and Mal figured it out. Mal was brilliant when he was recruiting him. Turned down, he got nowhere with Nick. Mal that figured out and did his homework and figured out that Terry longed for the college life and being, the head football coach at a major college, and you're much more involved than certainly you are in the NFL. And she really pushed hard for Nick to do, and then that's how it came to be and how it came to not be.
Hey, Chris, you've been around college football for a while, and you've seen programs transition. How soon is too early to push panic buttons? We're only in the first year with a new regime here, but a lot of folks are now calling for his head. Is this too early?
Well, first of all, pushing a panic. In terms of, I think it's absolutely too early in a tenure to fire a coach. But I've known Ed for 30-plus years and think the world of him. Equipped for the job. Is the rhetorical question I would ask, because I think everyone knows the answer is, if they were to make a change, do you trust the powers that be to make a new decision on the direction of the program? I think that the next step for LSU would take a good maybe 3, 6, maybe 9 months to be the best athletic director you can have for a multi-million-dollar corporation, which is LSU Athletics, and put that person in place and let him survey this situation and deal with it. That's, I think, the best way to go, because if there is a decision that needs to be made, then it needs to be made with under the guidance of better leadership than you have now. Joe, it was no secret that he didn't like Les. They didn't get along. Les didn't listen to him. Les didn't listen to anybody. And Ed listened to everybody. I tried to get him to talk to several other people because they didn't need to rush to hire Ed. Certainly need to have a huge buyout. Ed would have been there 2-3 weeks later. There were some prominent coaches that are very successful head coaches that were interested in the job. I talked with them. I'm friends with them, and they were very interested and never got a call. This was always going to be, Jimbo, and that was a quick no by Jim. Call back. And it was because it was a guy that would listen to Joe. Joe sits there every Sunday morning and watches film with Ed. You probably heard this week that he had a meeting with the two coordinators and Ed. That just doesn't happen. You're basically, when you say, all right, we're going to prop up a head coach, and we're going to go and hire the coordinators and let them do it. Well, guys, let me explain something. I've been doing this for 30 years. When your coordinators are basically a man that's the head coach, they might respect the title of the head coach, but they don't respect the acumen to turn to because they really don't trust Ed's football acumen to make the coordinator. He couldn't put fronts and coverages together, so he's not going to be a real asset there. And then all of a sudden you want to change the system in the middle of the game at halftime. Things like that put this in play. And so that's why I say that's where the whole – it's all rooted into something. You always have to –
Need a break.
Didn't he? This report is brought to you by
pretty good. From the Fox 8 Weather Center.
He knows his
All right,
stuff.
Too loud for you? I mean, don't screw with the volume. It's just popping because I guess you're getting too close.
Who, me? Probably, right?
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
From midnight
Okay.
to 1 a.m.
Wait, what
on
did you say?
Sunday
I didn't
morning.
hear what he said.
Do you want me to lean closer? Is
Sunday
this
morning.
I guess, but
Hand like a hand
yeah, you
away.
put your fist up.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think I'm getting it too close.
Yeah, because I mean it keeps popping.
But I can hear my. I can hear my. Oh yeah, we're trying to get Jimmy.
More of everyone.
Well,
that conversation.
Broadcast radio reaches 93% of Americans.
I think he
every
broke some
week.
news on there.
That's bigger than TV, Facebook, and Google.
In Indianapolis.
I'm in the country. There's a honky tonk near the county line.
Listen live weekdays on Sports 1280 and the free Sports 1280.
The devil went down to Georgia. He was looking for a soul to steal.
How can you be in a bad mood listening to this song? It's Fiddle Friday. I think we should change the name to Fiddle Friday.
I don't think we should do that. No,
should have a
I think it's a
fiddle.
terrible idea again, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Well, when you get your name on the name of the show,
That's
then
also
you
a
can
fair point.
Boom! Take that, Clark.
That's also a very fair point. Okay.
Until then,
Smackdown.
we will have Fiddle Friday. Everybody loves a fiddle. You should like.
I
you
do like a
probably-
fiddle. I do.
You don't like.
There's a fiddle in yellow card too, but I mean that's yellow card.
All right. All right. We'll get our next guest thoughts on this. Jimmy Detail. Jimmy Smith, our recruiting analyst at NOLA.com, covers the entire state, actually the entire kind of Gulf Coast recruiting scene, and is really wired in on the LSU Tigers and what their situation is right now in the recruiting world. Jimmy, I want to get your thoughts real quick, just yes or no. Do you enjoy fiddle music or not?
Hey, I'm kind of waiting to go back on break. I was really enjoying that.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's your answer.
Thank you very much. A man that knows music. Jimmy, so tell me real quick, let's get serious here about LSU. We just had Chris Landry on. He kind of laid out a lot of the problems of how LSU got to this point. I want to get your input on maybe where the future stands for this LSU football program, because recruiting is the future. We've already seen one top recruit, Kelvin Joseph, decommit. How much of an impact is that? Do they have a chance to get Kelvin Joseph back in the fold? It looks like a lot of heavy hitters are involved with him. And is this indicative of the optics right now of the LSU football program?
No, I wouldn't read too much into the Kelvin Joseph situation. This is a kid that's kind of flirted with the idea of decommitting for quite some time, even when Les Miles was the coach. He committed early in his high school career and never really, despite being an elite level prospect, some people saw him as a 5-star, high 4-star rated kid. He didn't receive the attention that most guys his caliber do. And he was trying to schedule some official visits. Schools wouldn't let him as long as he was committed to LSU because he is a local kid. He's been committed there for so long. They thought that he might just be about keeping his verbal pledge intact. And so they kind of nudged him in that direction and told him, hey, if you decommit from LSU, we'll take you on an official visit. Otherwise, we kind of have to part ways. And that was enough to kind of get Kelvin over the edge and decide to withdraw his verbal pledge. But I don't think that's going to be indicative of anything we're going to see in the future with other prospects necessarily from throughout the state. A lot of kids, when you talk to them now about what they expected from LSU this year and what they're witnessing, a lot of these kids expected this to be kind of a rebuilding year when you're talking to them. Going into the season, the fans were excited. A lot of the pundits were excited. But when you talk to the kids now, they tell you they didn't have extremely high expectations for LSU this year, being that they lost Leonard Fournette, Jamal Adams, Tre'Davious White, Beckwith, and so on. So, I don't think their play has had much of an impact on the guys committed. Now, guys they're trying to bring back into the loop, guys they're trying to flip, I certainly think the loss of momentum on the field is carrying over to the recruiting trail.
Well, I thought you had a really good post this week on NOLA.com about kind of explaining how we got to this point. You mentioned the quarterback situation. There is some promise now. Lowell Narcisse and Miles Brennan realize when they watch LSU and people look at all the stars in recruiting, but they don't appreciate experience in a program like Troy with upperclassmen going against, even if these guys are 4- and 5-star prospects at LSU, they're freshmen, and they haven't been on the field. These kids at Troy have played in Death Valley at Clemson and lost by 6 points against the national champions. So I think the question is, can they develop these young players? Your post this week, I thought, made a good point, is there's talent in the pipeline. It just might take a little while for it all to come together.
Yeah, and I mean, when we watch LSU on Saturdays this fall, the most noticeable drop-off is in the trenches. And, and they've taken some hits on the recruiting trail over the last couple of years that kind of led to that point. Not only that, guys they've had in the program transferred out. Maya Tahuma, Trevante Valentine. I mean, the list can kind of go on. You're talking multiple starters on both sides of the ball at those positions that are no longer with this program. Many 18-year-olds from the high school level that can come in and start in the SEC on the offensive defensive lines. The physicality is just different. A lot of those guys basically survive on strength and athleticism in high school and don't have much technique. So there's a lot of development that has to happen from the moment they get on campus to the moment they become solid contributors at the college level. But I do think this LSU defensive line is being revamped. We saw a good haul over the last couple of years. Some of those guys have been injured this year, but they're getting ready to play. I think next year you're going to see a lot better play on that defensive line group. And I think the offensive line has some really good young talent. They are missing some key contributors at certain positions, though. They don't have a left tackle anywhere on the roster, a starting or backup, and there doesn't seem to be one, committed for this recruiting cycle. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think they're going to have to go the junior college route and try to sign an offense. But they definitely, have some good young talent there. I think the future is brighter than what we're seeing today. But it's going to take a little time, and I think that's where LSU fans are having a little issue here. Is they thought they'd see immediate results, but they might need to be patient before you start seeing LSU play championship caliber football once again.
Hey, Jimmy, you mentioned the time frame there. It does take time. Does it concern you as a recruiter that you're talking to some of these recruits who say they understand that this is a rebuilding year, but most fans seem to just overlook that fact?
Yeah, fans, they want results immediately. LSU fans think LSU is an upper echelon program. I tend to agree with them. I think the resources are there to be one of the elite programs in college football, but even the elite programs, excluding maybe Alabama, have those rebuilding years. Florida State's kind of going through it right now. I expected Clemson to have a little bit of a drop-off, but, hey, it looks like Clemson's kind of on that Alabama level right now, and they're doing it by dominating in the trenches. I think, the problem is, are you going to show the young guys that the future is brighter? Or is Miles Brennan going to show up at some point this year and show them that he can be the quarterback of the future? Are they going to be able to see some of these young players become impact players before the season's end so they can kind of walk away and say, hey, the future looks bright at LSU. Let's kind of look past what we saw this year. They showed us all the signs that they're going to be better moving forward. I don't know if they've shown enough of that yet. We see a lot of young freshmen getting on the field, some making plays, some not so much. But I think the big question for a lot of these recruits is, how bright is that future at quarterback? How good can Miles Brennan be? We've all heard the hoopla and all the hype surrounding him, but we haven't quite seen it yet on the field. And at some point this year, backs and offensive linemen to think that the future is brighter than it has been in the past, because it's been quite some time since LSU had a good balanced offense.
Talking to Jimmy. You can follow him on Twitter at Jimmy Detail. Jimmy, one question before you go. I'm curious. You mentioned in your post this week about Hahnville's Anthony Williams, Puka Williams, who we've all heard a lot of great things about, and seems like his recruitment is picking up. Where does that stand right now? How interested is LSU, and who is the competition for him?
Yeah, it's an interesting recruitment. I mean, he's been a standout for quite some time, but he had some off-the-field issues, most notably his academic standing, and a lot of schools didn't know if he would qualify by the end of his high school career. At this point, I'm getting word that he could be what they're calling a non-academic qualifier or something to that effect, where he's basically forced to be an academic redshirt his freshman year. But that's good enough with his talent. That's good enough to give him a whole bunch of looks from college programs. But LSU seems to be one of the only schools really pushing for him at this time. Outside of Kansas, which he's still verbally committed, I don't think he ends up there. Schools really haven't jumped on yet. You know, I know Mickey Joseph, the LSU wide receiver coach, area recruiter, visited Hahnville recently and was able to really look at his academic situation, and they felt comfortable enough to offer. I don't know if other schools have had that opportunity yet. So right now they're kind of just chasing Kansas, you know, which doesn't seem like much of a chase, but for whatever reason, he remains verbally committed to Kansas. I think that could change in the future, and this is the kind of guy that makes everyone around him look better. You know, he can create on his own. He's got home run ability. You give him a little crease and he's gone. So this is the type of guy, when you have struggles at the quarterback position on the offensive line, you want guys like this on the perimeter that can change the scoreboard in an instant. So I think he's a priority for them moving forward, and I do think they end up signing Puka Williams.
Jimmy Smith, NOLA.com recruiting analyst. Thanks, Jimmy. We always appreciate your insight every Friday here, and we'll look forward to it again next week, man. You have a great weekend.
Are you sending me off at the fiddle? Do I need to stay on the phone?
That'll be up to Dave. That'll be. Does that guy know his stuff or what?
He knows it.
All right, buddy. You take care. And we will take our last break here before the top of the hour, and we'll try and get a little fiddle into the music as we listen to Dunc and Holder once again on Sports 1280, NOLA.com, the iHeartRadio app. We'll be right back.
Keep one thing in mind.
Who's pursuing Kansas?
On the river
It's a four-letter word.
Kansas is a player, bro. Clear. Still the coach again?
No. So see, I got the sports section of the day on.
That's why HalloweenCostumes.com
We could get some kind of any kind of other NOLA.com.
made exclusively.
We don't really have
for
anything.
Your favorite movie, your favorite
Well, this is
artist,
showing up.
your favorite food. We have them
Oh,
all.
that's right. We do
from
need a
video games to fairy
need
tale.
a dash.
So we need a dash.
The new branding. Well, I talked to Bonnie about getting some kind of new branded.
All right, 1 minute.
/iHeart because we're partnering with them to get you 15% off. Go to HalloweenCostumes.com/iHeart
What's that?
and own Halloween.
Yeah.
iHeartRadio. All your
Yeah, we got a
favorite
good break,
music,
so.
all your favorite stations, all
Preparing for the. We're not on a full-scale hurricane alert, are we? Here.
Most of your week is
How much time we have on the break?
Almost getting ready to come right back.
30 seconds.
We have to hang it.
Yeah, you have a longer break at the end, bro.
Well, yeah, we only got 8. This is only going to be an 8-minute segment.
Okay.
If that.
Advice so you can dominate your league. Get your
Pat's only on for 8
football
minutes?
fix right on the app.
Oh, we talked, and then we
Yeah.
break that.
Let me go to the break.
For real food from a real place, brought to you by
Yeah, and don't forget Bob in Destrehan.
Oh, okay.
Wild and Sustainable at your local
Bob.
recipes
Bob.
and cooking tips.
Bob and
Go to
Metairie.
WildAlaskaSeafood.com.
Why we have to go? Why we have to always go to Metairie, Herb?
Yeah, I mean, why did you say her?
This is Dunc and Holder on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
Just listen to that fiddle. Oh gosh, that's incredible. Does not make you want to.
Oh, and it's actually Old Crow Medicine Show. That's great.
It's
That's
the
fantastic.
original.
Thank God.
The original
Thank
wagon
you.
wheel.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it for actually playing the classic and not the one sung by the dude who used to be in Hootie and the Blowfish. Thank you.
Who, by the way, sang the national anthem.
Yes, he did.
At the Saints-Dolphins game.
Darius Rucker can sing, man.
Yes, he can.
Darius Rucker can
Especially in Hootie and the Blowfish, he totally can sing. You're absolutely right.
You know, I have a soft spot in my heart for the original version of anything. I think it's always easy to do a cover of something after someone else has created
It's true.
something. So I always will go back to the Old Crow Medicine Show version of Wagon Wheel. So let's go to our caller line real quick. Get Bob from Destrehan. Bob, how you doing on this Friday? Welcome to Dunc and Holder.
Thank you, sir. How are you guys doing?
Terrific, man. It's a great day. We're having a good time here listening to some fiddle music. Can't be any better.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, I just have a few thoughts I just want to get off my chest. I'm not a fan of Ed Orgeron, but I just don't see his experiment working out. Two questions. It's kind of early and premature, and the season hasn't by far ended, but any idea of any names in the pipeline or anywhere that could possibly come up, not even through LSU, that could possibly be a choice as to the next head coach? Because I just don't see him lasting for next season. And can I make a suggestion? What about the idea of somebody like Broderick Fobbs of Grambling, considering the amount of successes he had with the limited resources? I don't know. I'm intrigued by that idea, and I'll just hang up and listen.
Well, Bob, thanks for the call, and I think it's entirely too early to speculate on a replacement unless things completely fall apart and Ed Orgeron goes 3-8 or something crazy or has some kind of off-field scandal. He's going to be the head coach. Hired Ed Orgeron. His neck is on the line. He's going to give him as long of a rope as he possibly can, and I'll just be surprised if there's any kind of change. Joe Oliva is probably going to be out.
Yep.
So I don't really think we're going to see that kind of change. And look, it's Landry. It's not really that unexpected if you really took off your purple and gold glasses and looked at the state of the program and the state of the roster. The fact they're playing so many true freshmen for a program of the LSU's status, that's an indictment on past recruiting classes and the attrition that has hit the program over the last few years. Now, whose fault is that? I don't know. Those were recruiting misses. Maybe they didn't judge the character of some of these players. I know they've had to kick off a lot of players. Some of these players weren't good enough to play at LSU. Some of them were character risks that ended up getting kicked out, or academic risks. That's part of putting together a program. You have to analyze all that when you're in the player procurement phase of recruiting, and LSU really lacks, and I think you have to point the finger there to some degree to Les Miles, because he's the guy that recruited these guys, and it's all falling apart.
I've seen this happen at my alma mater, at Kansas State, when Bill Snyder retired and they brought in Ron Prince. Ron Prince was given a certain amount of time to get his players in because he had inherited a lot of Bill Snyder's players. And granted, it started off slow for Ron Prince. The alumni, the boosters, the students, they were up in arms. It's kind of pretty much like what I'm seeing right now at LSU. You got to give them time. 1 year, it is a rebuilding year. You have to allow them to turn the stuff around because he is working with a lot of Les Miles' players. So give him time to get his scheme in place and his players in place.
But Herbie, didn't Ron Prince also run into some other trouble towards the end of his tenure?
Yes,
that
he did.
Kind of unfortunately.
He lasted 3 whole years there, though. But there was an understanding. If you look at it, like Jeff here said, if you take off your glasses, it's funny that K-State is also purple, but a lot of us had to take off our purple glasses and say, give him an opportunity here to get his players in. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out. If it doesn't work out here, then you move on.
Right. And I'd like to tackle that last question. First of all, kudos to the caller for recognizing the job that Broderick Fobbs is doing at Grambling, going from a team that was in disarray before he started to winning the Black College National Championship last year.
I agree. I'm a huge Broderick Fobbs fan. What he's done there should not be overlooked, but that's a big leap to LSU.
That's a big jump. The closest that you could probably get to that would be Frank Wilson, because I know there's going to be a lot of people talking about what Frank Wilson is doing at UTSA and him making that leap to a bigger Power 5 job here in the next year, maybe 2 years or so. But the day LSU hires a black head coach is the day that I go out on Canal Street in a purple and gold tight green man-like suit and dance, because I don't ever see it happening.
Well, that's ridiculous if it doesn't happen.
I agree. I think there are a lot of African-American head coaches here in the NCAA who deserve a shot as either coordinators. You see what Willie Taggart's doing. Guys like that. I would totally be willing for that. I just don't see LSU ever doing it. I don't see LSU ever going on that limb for the exact reason that Chris Landry talked about when we had him on. There's too many politics. There are way too many people who have their hands in the cookie jar that don't need to have their hands in the cookie jar that will not allow it to happen because they don't believe, just like Red McComb said at Texas. Thinking that some aren't quote unquote qualified or ready for a job like that, and it's bunk. It's totally bunk, and that's the exact same reason why I don't see it happening at LSU ever.
Well, I agree with this point that Chris Landry made. From my limited experience covering LSU as a beat writer, it's always about politics at LSU, and that's one of the biggest problems and one of the biggest obstacles they have in hiring quality head coaches in the future. If they do end up making a move away, that's what they've got to overcome. You have to get somebody in there that can handle those politics. A strong head coach like Nick Saban, those guys are few and far between. We all know that.
40 seconds.
All right, 1 hour in the books, a very action-packed hour. We'll have another one coming up here at 11 o'clock. We'll have Catherine Terrell, our former colleague.
Can't wait.
Is going to weigh in on the NFL and also
make fun of Larry.
Cam Newton situation. We'll also get our NFL picks as well as we turn to Clyde's glory days. So that's it for Dunc and Holder's Hour 1 in the books. We'll be right back. Sports 1280, NOLA.com, the iHeartRadio app. Stay with us.
Admiring how sharply my first name is written on you with a Sharpie when I get to hitting on them to help me get lucky. Red Solo Cup.
iHeartRadio. All your favorite music. All your
Red Solo Cup.
And
there you go, buddy.
Football season in full swing.
All right, Jeff, you got to remember to give out the phone number as well, all right?
Yeah.
When you're you want to end, like just now I ended up potting you down on accident because I thought you were done.
Right.
When you do, you're listening, this is Sports 1280, NOLA.com, the iHeartRadio app. This is Dunc and Holder.
Right.
Either stop there or give out the station, or before you do that, give out the phone number. So
I got you.
Whenever we're going to break, just kind of like, hey, if you want to get in on the party, 260-1280, 260-1280, and you're listening to Dunc and Holder, Sports 1280, NOLA.com, and the iHeartRadio app.
Beautiful.
And
all right.
Boom, that's it.
Staying alive.
And any derivative or variation that you choose, but you kind of want to end on giving out the information of the name of the show and what station it's on.
FM HD2 New Orleans. Listen.
Yeah, the reasoning behind that is we're a diary market, which means you always want to pound the station, like you want to let people know it's Sports 1280, because when they do the ratings, it's a diary market. It means people have to hand write in what they're listening to.
Right.
And that's why you always hear people just pounding the station that it's on.
Right, so they remember
Diamond
it.
First up.
Yeah. So, you could, I haven't talked with Larry about it, but yeah, it might be a good thing to kind of flip-flop stuff so that you end on, you're listening to Dunc and Holder on the iHeartRadio app, or do NOLA.com, the iHeartRadio app, and Sports 1280.
Yeah, I think that sounds better, too.
Honest and keeping guys.
I like that. All right.
And so that way when you end, you kind of put on the radio voice and be like, Sports 1280.
Yeah, no, I like
Boom,
it. I got it.
Deal, but one of those things where it's just a cat and mouse game.
At 5 Eastern, Cleveland and Corey Kluber will host the Yankees and CC Sabathia for game 1-0. Chicago
what the hell, man?
Up in Washington.
What does that even mean?
Eastern, Dodgers and Arizona.
Shop now for up to 40% off select major appliance hot deals from your
You
favorite
gonna
brands
do?
like LG, GE, and Samsung.
I'm a dangerous
still not-
man
I'm still
with
not-
money in my pocket.
Purchases of
Keep up.
These deals can't be beat. J.C. Penney. Available in select stores. Some exclusions apply.
I got 4 minutes.
10-12. Must request at time of purchase. Subject to credit approval.
Out in the country, bud.
Yeah, Brooks and
I believe we could get 5,000
They got
ounces
whiskey
in one
women.
season.
Music and
100
smoke.
ounces on it with Parker.
It's ready, set, go.
That's our best start ever.
Oh, we're on YouTube?
yeah, we gotta keep it going, dude. So they enjoy our does not play that again because I don't want to hear it because I've heard enough. I've heard enough in my life. I don't want to hear it
The
again.
average person has lost half.
As soon as I
of
heard
their
that fiddle,
short-term
I was like,
memory.
hit me in the face with a shovel.
Don't ignore the warning signs of age. Memory formula supported by 20 years of memory research. A scientific study shows that Cebria can improve your memory in just 30 days. Just call 1-800-990-7211.
Teenage kids too far from home.
freememoryoffer.com.
She was a lonely widow woman.
Don't wait. Call 1-800-990-7211 or go to freememoryoffer.com.
We were the sun
is yours for the taking. That's why HalloweenCostumes.com/iHeart
as far as I can see. Which we're going to have to talk about how you're going to want to do this.
Doesn't want to do a fantasy pick of the week because
He's literally, because I mean, it's like I told him though on I told Jeff when he wanted to do this, I was like, oh, that's easy. My fantasy lock of the week is Daenerys Targaryen, Queen of the Dragons.
Okay.
Clearly she's a winner.
To get you 15% off. Go to HalloweenCostumes.com.
All right, so we're going to go to Catherine pretty early in this segment.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting. I mean, do you want to come to her straight out the intro?
No, we'll talk for a few minutes because she told me that her press conference ends at the top of the hour and she's not sure if it'll go over.
Okay. All
so
right,
she
all
thought
right.
maybe.
So you do want me to call around 11:10?
Yeah,
so.
if that works. Okay. Can we go
Maybe
a little bit into
what we
the?
do is we can take a quick break, and then you can have a little extended segment or something with her.
Okay. So take a quick break before that.
Yeah. So like we're about to start in about a minute and a half, and that would be basically about a 5-7 minute segment, and that way you can come back to her, knock out the interview, take a break.
Perfect.
And then do the college pick'ems.
Yep, that's
wait,
perfect.
No, we were doing the
pros.
Which one are we doing?
Pros.
Pro
But that's perfect because we'll want to talk to her a little longer. So.
Yeah, right.
All right, sounds good.
Unless there's a recovery in your favor.
That's the lady who covers the Bengals, huh?
Right. Yes. Yeah, used to work for us.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was looking at some of her tweets yesterday. It's funny. Whoa, lady, talking about
18-wheelers and truck drivers deal with blind spots around the entire vehicle. Always take care not to ride alongside or too close behind them. Our roads, our safety.
Your favorite station, all free.
Tom Jones.
Now, with football season in full swing, let's be honest, most of your week is focused on your fantasy team or teams. No reason to leave the iHeartRadio app, because now we have
If I'm not mistaken, the last New Orleans or Louisiana player K-State recruited was
Dominate your league. Get your fantasy football fix right on the app. Fantasy Sports Radio Network. iHeartRadio.
TGIF New Orleans, Hour 2, Duncan Holder, rolling like a freight train through downtown New Orleans. We're broadcasting live from the NOLA.com studios. And sitting in for the esteemed Larry Holder is the esteemed Herbie Tiope. How'd your first hour go, buddy?
First hour went very well. I think Bert from Metairie would certainly appreciate the effort that I gave here. But I may be esteemed, but don't forget, you are incomparable.
Well, that's true. We do know that. And, of course, Clyde Verdun over at the what is this desk? We need a name for the desk.
Yeah, we do need a name for it. I call it the kids' side table at Thanksgiving. I don't ever get to be on the YouTube stream unless something's going wrong, and then I'm just kind of like the ambient voice that comes in every now and then, kind of like on PTI.
The auxiliary table that every family wheeled in on the big holidays. And you weren't quite.
I got a big plate of turkey though, boy.
Couldn't make it to the big table.
Couldn't make it to the adult table.
I'm close though. I'm so close. I've just got to act like an adult enough to want to get over there at some point.
Well, if you start liking fiddle music a little more, you might graduate up.
I do not hate fiddle music. I'm just saying, like, there's a difference between like fiddle music that's like dominant or like bluegrass. Like, there's a difference.
And if you would like to weigh in on the quality or the pros and cons of fiddle music, you can join us on our caller line. Call at 260-1280, 800-364-1280. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that, or the Saints. Tulane's got a big game this weekend against Tulsa. That game's been moved up because of the concerns with Tropical Storm Nate. It's now an 11 o'clock kickoff out at Ullman Stadium, and also, of course, the big game down in Gainesville with LSU in Florida. I was talking to an editor today about that. It's a big game no matter what happens. Either LSU's going to win, and they've righted the ship temporarily back to being a carnival in Baton Rouge, or they're going to lose it. and we're going to be full-scale crisis mode in Baton Rouge. So one way or the other, it's a big game.
Yeah, I mean that's one. I mean that's the only two ways you can put it clearly, and I think kind of like what both. I think it was interesting that we both had Chris Landry and Jimmy on because I think it highlighted the dichotomy or the dichotomous situation of what fans are going to have to deal with. Because it's like you said, Ed Orgeron is not getting fired this year, and unless it's like an absolute catatonic failure, I'm talking about there's no life meter left. That's the only way I can see it happen. But again, no one's going to want to pay $12 million and then still have to pay Les Miles to a total of $20 million in dead money. But you're going to have to deal with it. Whatever happens, this team isn't terrible, but this team has a very, very tough run ahead of itself.
It's a realistic view that you have to have. If you entered this season with the understanding this is rebuilding, and if you're coming out right now thinking, oh, the world...
Put realistic and LSU fans anywhere in the same household, in the same vicinity, they really even can't be in the same solar system. I'm sorry.
But here's what I think, in defense of LSU fans, who are among the most passionate and loyal fans in all of college sports.
And the angriest.
In their defense, I think if the team were just playing better, if the performance and execution were better, and if they would have maybe had, like I said yesterday, if you lay an egg once against Mississippi State, or and then you come back and have some really impressive performances, I think people would be a little more forgiving and maybe relaxed about this start. But right now, they haven't had one really lights-out performance at all. I mean, when we look back at the Brigham Young game, it did not look good. It looks worse now with the benefit of hindsight because Brigham Young is not very good this year. And then you lay an egg at Mississippi State, and then they have since not been competitive in the SEC. And the Syracuse game was nip and tuck there in the fourth quarter. And then you lose to Troy, and there's really nothing that this team has been able to hang their hat on and say, yeah, you know what, that was a fluke, that Mississippi State game.
Yeah.
Question for you, though, because you had mentioned this earlier. LSU, how many freshmen are starting right now?
I don't know exactly the number. It's up and down. It changes.
If I remember correctly from the note in the game notes from Monday, they've had 17 true freshmen play. 8 have been starters, or 8 are considered starters right now.
So when you think about how young this team is, and obviously LSU plays on a, I look at the SEC as a farm league for the National Football League because that's basically what it is. Is the stage getting too big for these guys?
Well, I think it's too big for most freshmen, but in this situation, there's just too many of them being forced out there, and even some of the veteran players have not performed up to standard. So I think it's been across the board. You can't really target one thing.
And even bigger to what you were talking about with Chris about the New York Times story, I think an even better headline is not did Nick Saban break LSU, did Nick Saban break the SEC? Because I think there has to be a conversation there about what Nick Saban has done to the SEC, what the SEC was when Nick Saban returned from the Miami Dolphins to what he has done now, what he has continued to do, while the rest of the teams around him, the stalwarts, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, LSU, and then now A&M, what they've done around him to make it to the point where, the SEC is just the SEC. They used to be strong, but we're really just waiting for Alabama to steamroll until they get to the college football playoff.
Well, it's certainly devastated the rest of the SEC West. We've already seen some head coaching turnover in the SEC West. We're probably going to see some more this offseason with what's going on at Texas A&M and perhaps at Arkansas. Certainly, Ole Miss is already in the midst of a transfer of coaching,
and more trouble.
And LSU has already gone through Les Miles. So he's devastated the SEC West, and I think probably most of the SEC. But we will switch gears real quick. That was a nice take. I appreciate your input, both of you all, on that. We're going to switch gears and go to the NFL with our next guest after this break. We're going to bring in Catherine Terrell, who used to work with us here at NOLA.com. She's now up at ESPN. She's a proud LSU Tiger, so we'll get her thoughts on LSU, but we'll also get her thoughts on the NFL and also this Cam Newton situation, which has become a very serious subject across the NFL during this past week. And we'll talk to her when we come back. You're listening to Sports 1280, NOLA.com, the iHeartRadio app. We are Dunc and Holder.
Gonna lay in the hot sun and roll a big fat one and grab my guitar and play.
Action packed.
She's at the
Did he say I was going to lay on my back and roll up the fat one?
Hey, man, that's Zach Brown, dude. He has no problem talking about lighting it up.
That's Triplet's favorite band.
Really?
Yeah.
Zach Brown?
Yep.
This is
Am I
Tulane
hearing
football.
things?
The way. Welcome to Tulsa Golden
Catherine's still
Hurricane to
alive
Ullman
from a press
Stadium.
conference.
Saturday, October 7th, right here on your home for Tulane football.
Sports 1280, New Orleans.
Wine on the River, presented by Southern Glazers, WGNO TV ABC, and NOLA 38, the CW. Saturday, November 11th at Audubon Aquarium Plaza from 3 to 6. Limited VIP and general admission on sale now at NOLA.com. Proceeds benefit the Louisiana Hospitality
I mean, seriously,
Foundation.
if you're an 18-year-old kid, and I know you've been programmed to play football your entire high school career,
and you've experienced
junior high,
complications
etc.,
or
and
need
all
a
of a sudden,
revision
right
surgery,
smack in
you
the
may
middle
be
of freaking
entitled to
LSU.
significant financial compensation. Injuries from metal-on-metal hip
The
implants
spotlight
can
and all
include
that good
metallosis,
stuff.
loosening of parts,
Is
pain,
pressure overrated?
difficulty in walking, and other problems. Manufacturers have set aside
That's a good
billions
question,
of
man.
dollars to
'Cause,
settle these legal claims.
I think even
You
beyond
are
that,
not alone.
if you're
Thousands
talking
of hip
about
implant patients have
knowing
received recalls
that,
for their hip
especially,
replacement
first
device
of all, let's
and
talk about
are
high
suffering
school.
painful
Let's
side
talk about the
effects.
elite,
If you
elite
received a
recruits. What do they already
metal
think?
hip
They already
implant
think
and
they're
have
the
suffered
best,
injuries
the
or
best.
underwent
They're ready to go right
revision
away.
surgery to
Like, I'm ready
correct
to go
the
up
issue,
against
call the
whatever
hip
top
implant
receiver you
helpline
got, especially
now
like a
at
DB or like one of those guys. I'm ready to go against whoever you got, and I'm gonna shut it down.
Experience matters.
And
All right, 1 minute, and we have Catherine on the line.
Awesome.
Consultation
Thanks,
is
Dave.
free, and you'll pay nothing unless
Once
there's a
you get to the
recovery in your
SEC,
favor.
and once you
Call
start
800-846-1313.
Eight times,
800-846-1313.
it's gonna change your attitude a little bit.
800-846-1313.
And I think to your
Interrupt
point,
your broadcast to
specifically,
bring you this.
All right, 30 seconds.
how much has that been
only
a
be
watershed
described
moment
as
for a
a
lot of these
giant
kids saying,
junior
"Oh
bacon
crap, I had no
cheeseburger,
idea
a
it'd be
delicious
something like
anomaly,
this, and I had
doubling
no
the
idea
size
it'd
and
be
taste of
something."
Wendy's
17
iconic
freshmen,
junior
that's a
bacon
lot of damn
cheeseburger.
players.
Double
That's
the
a lot.
bacon,
Like, we were
double
tracking
the
that
cheese,
last
and
year.
good heavens,
We were talking
on
about how
top of
many
the
guys,
fresh,
like we were
never
tracking that
frozen
last year with
beef.
how many
And
guys were
what's
actually
this?
coming into
A
the round,
Wendy's
coming in
giant
line
junior
either
bacon
on the
cheeseburger with
line,
nuggets, fries, and a
running
drink
back,
for
or,
just
like, offensively,
$5.
or
Run,
on defense.
run to your
We thought we
nearest
were gonna hit that
Wendy's.
You know,
With U.S., Alaska, and
he's pretty much basically saying, I want to get my people in there.
Half Cherokee and Choctaw, my baby, she's a Chippewa, she's a one of a kind.
This is Dunc and Holder on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
I'm wondering if this was intentional on Dave.
Yeah, walk-up music,
Walk
just
up.
like in baseball.
No, WWE.
Well, it's up to her.
I think Catherine would have a different walk-up music.
I was going to
Knowing
ask,
her-
is she Native American? Because if so, that's even more bossed by Dave.
Well, let's get her thoughts on this because she has perhaps the worst musical taste of anyone I know. And a native, now works at ESPN, lives up in Cincinnati, covers the Cincinnati Bengals, and is without question the worst musical follower. What's this band that you like? What's the band?
I gotta ask you, what's been going on with your school the last 2 weeks?
Look,
Wow.
I'm running the program here.
Shots
and I
fired.
ask the questions.
Shots fired.
And the questions is,
Shot
what
cat.
is the name of that musical act that you like, that you've seen, like, for all of...
Anniversary of their debut album this year.
That's exactly...
Who doesn't love Third Eye Blind? Semi-Charmed Life?
This guy right here. That's who does.
Jumper?
Semi-Charmed Life, yeah. Semi-Charmed Life.
We'll get to the musical part of this program a little bit later, but let's get into some NFL talk real quick. Seriously, I want to get your thoughts. First of all, you cover a team that has been in the playoffs a number of years. It's been kind of wacky. The first month of the season, it's kind of been turned on its head. There's place. So, what have you made of this start, and is your team able to recover, or do you think this is going to be a transition year for the Bengals?
But the Patriots were going to be much better than they are, even though their record would be better. But then, of course, they go. Maybe I drank the Kool-Aid, but I thought the Bengals would be better. It's been a crazy few weeks, but I think that the Bengals can definitely turn things around. Steelers for a chance to kind of gain some ground in the AFC North, and if they lose, well, then their season is.
And I tell you, I don't think the Bengals are alone in this. I think there's a lot of teams that struggled out of the gate early on and got injuries. Everybody's got people falling by the wayside. We see it all across the league. They've had on offense, but it seems like their defense is pretty stout and keeps them in games, and that's something to be said. Obviously, it's been a huge story around the league. Covering the NFL, in your experience, what were your thoughts when you first heard what Cam Newton, the site of just how difficult it is to be a female reporter in an all-male world like you've had to do now for several years, covering?
Thought back over my years covering NFL, and if I'd ever had an experience like that, I could say that maybe one-on-one, and nothing like it. Lucky, I've just dealt with really great guys like Drew Brees and Andy Dalton. So when I heard Cam Newton's comments, it are always looking to prove ourselves. We always want to prove that we belong there. That really wasn't cool, especially because Jordan has been there for a year. So that was my first thought. And then it's evolved into something entirely the last few days. And basically, I feel that what Cam said was wrong, but it doesn't define him as a person. And just as I hope Cam learns from what happened. They both apologized, and hopefully everyone can just move on from this.
Catherine, good talking to you, by the way. Great to have you on the show. But if you were an editor, how would you address the lack of diversity in a newsroom and also in press boxes?
Herbie, that's what we call him, Hardball Herbie.
No, it's a good question. It's a good question because I think that it's completely valid. There's not a lot of diversity in our profession, and there should be, because if that's the case, everyone has made strides to doing it, but like I said, I think it starts back in college. I think that there needs to be ways to, but people don't always have the means to do that. It's difficult. Some people, like myself, I was lucky enough to be able to do 2 unpaid internships. Resources. So it gets back to how do you help them? And I don't know. I mean, maybe you create more business, and that's tough because, as we all know, our business is not exactly booming right now.
Of ESPN, she covers the Cincinnati Bengals for NFL Nation, and of course, LSU graduate. Used to work here at NOLA.com with us. Of what Newton said, and I don't want to belabor this point because we got some other things we want to talk to you about, but the fact that you said he knows her, he knows her name, and yet he almost put her under this huge umbrella and used this sweeping generalization of her. Did that bother you at all? And have you encountered anything like that? I know you said you haven't heard under covering the NFL.
Oh, definitely. It did bother me because, that's a problem. I mean, she has just as much right to be there as anyone else. She's worked just as hard. So why does her question get laughed at? It bother me as the whole context, but you make a valid point. But yeah, all the time. I mean, the Bengals, and I thought that was weird, and someone tweeted at me and said, it's so weird to hear a female talk about that. And the comment didn't bother me, but it's just what we hear all the time. And I will tell you, and what came back at me was a firestorm that I did not anticipate, and the tweets just kept coming for 24 hours. And I wasn't even the one involved, and you can guess what some of them entailed, but it's something we do.
In social media, when you have this courage when they don't have to face somebody, and it's one of the unfortunate. And I've learned over the years, as you and I have talked, you stay above fire, and people become emboldened by the mob mentality, and it's no different than what we see because she got caught up in it, unfortunately, and it really is irrelevant to the main topic at hand. All right, let's switch gears, Catherine, real quick. And I'm not picking on you in this in any way, but I want to get you. Look, you're an LSU grad. Don't you think that's a little premature right now? I mean, the guy's been on the job for 5 games.
So, all right, there's a truck next to me, and it's making a lot of loud noises, so I don't know if y'all can hear me, but so I just walked out of the Bengals locker room about an hour ago, and I was talking. I said, I know, had to throw that in there, and I said, hey, how's LSU going to do this weekend? And the player goes, they're going to get blown out. So that is where that program is right now. Even the ex-players aren't believing in them. And the same player told me, I thought they were going to be fine. If they're running a lot fired right now, it doesn't really matter. His buyout is $12 million. They're still paying less. They have to figure out how to. Now looks kind of like a joke. Maybe that's harsh, but they do, and that's going to affect recruiting classes. So then you get into this spiral where the program, they could have sat back after Herman turned them down and did a coaching search and looked at a lot of worthy candidates, and they didn't, and now they're kind of facing the repercussions of that. So they don't look good right now, Jeff. It's going to be a major problem. I mean,
Nation, there's no doubt. But let's see if they can put this thing back together. This is a critical stretch. The next 4 games, they could easily lose all 4 of them. I mean, it's the most difficult stretch of the season. But program, Larry Holder was ready to fire everybody in the state's organization. Sean Payton was needed to go, and
that's
now
his job, right?
Now everything is sunshine and rose round, and they do often in the NFL. They do often in college football. So let's see how it plays out.
Well,
But
at this point, they just want to make a bowl. I mean, Walk-On is now sponsoring the Independence Bowl. That might be very timely.
I don't think you want to go to Shreveport.
I know it's at @cat_Terrell, but tell people how they can follow you.
You can follow all my ramblings on @_Terrell, TERRELL. And also, if you want to read about the Bengals, just go to.
Very successful. We appreciate you joining in, and we'll see you very soon down here in the Pelican State. We know you'll be making a visit back our way very soon.
Yeah.
Catherine Terrell of ESPN joining the program. Thanks, Catherine, and we will take another break here on Dunc and Holder. When we come back, our much awaited of the week right here on Dunc and Holder, Sports 1280, NOLA.com, and the iHeart Radio app. Stick with us.
I do have a comment.
You got to either back up from your mic or something, man, because you keep popping, and I know you're not yelling, but it's peeking out and it's cracking.
All right, buddy.
Watches in effect for all of the area.
I will come over there and kick you.
Maybe it's something we discuss on air, because when you've got male fans attacking female reporters,
3:45. I'll be back.
The problem there is
pick up things that may blow around.
There are
we
a
are
lot of
expecting the weather to begin to
solid,
deteriorate
fantastic
by the afternoon Saturday, especially Saturday night, making landfall with late around midnight to 1 a.m. on Sunday morning. So overnight Saturday into Sunday morning through about mid-morning, we are expecting the possibility of hurricane force winds, gusting even higher, along with that, heavy rains and squalls. From the Fox 8 Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Bruce Katz with your Weather Authority forecast.
I'm sure you would have hated to hear that too.
One used the weed killer Roundup and were diagnosed with cancer, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Call now for your free claim evaluation.
Sports 1280.
That is a great quote, because you can tie that into college. You can tie that into NFL. You can tie it into like anything, like a lot of things sports related.
He said, "Coach, I'm coming to LSU
needing more
unless I get a
diversity
head job
within and
want
without
a head job."
Yeah, I look at my old
Are you Jim? Why are you being so perverse? I'm not even attempting to be perverse here. This is the direction you're taking.
I'm sorry, what did he want?
I'm assuming they did everything they could to get him a head job, but he was honest with us. He said, Coach, I'm coming to LSU unless I get a head job, and I want a head job. Stop laughing.
I'm just happy that we got Coach O.
Then we hear about Florida Atlantic, and we didn't think he'd take that. But he calls and says, hey, man, I'm coming. I've got one more meeting, and I'm just going to listen to them.
Well, sure, when picks next, this should be fun.
What kind of job?
Yes, we need lock of the week, upset of the week,
unless he gets a head job,
and
he wanted
whether you like it or not, the fantasy, the star of the weekend. Like we need to pick out a player you think might have a big weekend. It could be a defensive player, it doesn't have to be fantasy, just an individual
star of the week.
Okay, star of the week. You think might have like a good game, like a Justin Houston or something. Just trying to get some opinion, you know, like.
If they want your money,
I'm on it.
Take
They
can
I'm on
take
it,
your
doggone
paycheck
it.
and bank accounts too. Even threaten your home or business.
It's kind of a weak weekend, other than that Chiefs-Texans game. Packers-Cowboys pretty
Todd
good.
Gurley versus the Seahawks.
Yeah, that's a good decent
thing
game.
you can do is call Optima Tax Relief. Optima has access to a special IRS tax assistance program.
So I'll
called
kick it
the
over to
Fresh
you,
Start Initiative,
Clyde. You
and their
can
clients that qualify are saving thousands, even tens of thousands.
You
One
can
call
kinda
starts
lead
the
it.
process
Okay.
to stop the
Okay.
demand letters,
You know, the
stop
picks,
aggressive collection
upset of the
actions,
week, lock
and
of the
stop
week.
that army of new enforcers from targeting you. But don't delay. It's important to act now while you still have options.
I've got a
Optima
lock
is
of the
A-rated
week.
with the
I'm
Better Business
excited to
Bureau.
talk
Optima
about it.
has already resolved
Somebody
over
has to
$500
win the
million
Chargers
in
and
tax debt
Giants.
for their clients. Get your life back. Call now for your free
0-4.
consultation.
Call 800-798-20.
Somebody has to
45
win.
seconds.
That's 800-798-2477. 800-798-2477.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Colonel Sanders from KFC here to talk about the good old days. Well, the good old days are still here in chicken form.
Hey, Dave, we got one more
KFC's
break
original recipe fried
after
chicken
this.
with 11 herbs and spices.
Yes.
So we take this for about 15 minutes or so and then break.
No, I mean, yeah,
10?
about 20 minutes, I guess.
There's a biscuit, a cookie, and a drink at a KFC near you. KFC, it's still finger-licking good. At participating KFCs, prices may vary. Tax extra.
There might be a little dust on the bottle, but don't let it fool you about what's inside.
Our All-Stars bring you the inside knowledge for your home teams. Sports 1280, New Orleans.
Welcome back. Duncan Holder's flying today, guys.
Yeah, it is.
Got a half hour left in the show.
We're having some fun, man.
Country Fried Friday. Dave is keeping it true, keeping it real.
And he played a little third eye blind for Catherine on her outro, which was, again, very classy.
Yeah, I've had many conversations with Catherine about Third Eye Blind. It's not helping much.
You know, when people think of me, classy is the first adjective that springs to mind.
Naturally. Yes, of course. It's the first thing.
Competent is another one.
Yes,
He's
true.
Very, very
Good call.
competent. All right, let's get into the NFL picks. We got a big weekend. Look, we had the first game of the weekend last night. New England Patriots win 19-14. Herbie, obviously the Bucks have major kicking issues.
They have defensive issues now, too.
Still.
Man. I mean, way too many injuries. Way too many injuries.
So if you're a Saints fan, you got to feel okay right now. You're 2-2.
Falcons lost last week.
You have to feel if you were to, when you look at how the season started, and if you're 2-2 at this point and you're only a game out of first place in the NFC South, you have to be feeling pretty darn good.
I feel like it's wide. The NFC, who's the best team in the NFC? Can you name the best team?
Nope.
No.
Who is it? No one stood out. Maybe the Lions. They rightfully should have beaten the Falcons.
Yeah.
They'd be 4-0 right now.
Well, we'll find out how good they are this week because they play the Panthers.
Yeah.
Right.
That'll be a good game.
Well, we're going to talk about that because that's going to come up in my little segment of our program. So we're going to change things up. We've been doing like every game, and as you know, Clyde, I think it's the most boring radio in the world.
We don't have enough. We don't have enough feedback to know whether it's not, so we can tell Jeff that is actually a good part of radio. So we are going to indulge Jeff Duncan this week with the new twist on our picks.
Other than talking about Third Eye Blind, it's got to be the worst radio in the world.
So harsh. So harsh.
I'm just saying, no one wants to sit here and listen to us talk about picks, but they will. Even though I know it's a 4-letter word for Herbie, who does not believe does not believe in fantasy football. How can you not believe in fantasy football and you cover it for a living?
Think about this. I've actually been to games as a fan. When I've sat in the stadium and I hear people no longer paying attention to what's going on the field. Oh, Jeff Duncan just scored a touchdown. That's 6 points for me. Never mind what's going on the football field. I think fantasy has changed how people view the game.
Yeah, Richard Sherman.
And well, it's true. and so when you have
that, increased more interest in the game.
It's increased more interest in the game. That is true. But again, are they really interested in the game, or the aspect of how many touchdowns, how many catches is Jeff Duncan going to have Sunday?
Well, there's truth to that. There's no question. I think people think if you're good at fantasy football, you know a lot about football, which we all know
it's not true.
No, that's not translated at all.
That's not true
incredibly wrong.
Peter King talked about that on the program earlier this year. He got in his daughter's league, and he came in last. And Peter King is probably one of the foremost NFL writers in the business. And many of the people in the league he was in used the, what do they call it, the auto draft?
Yes.
Where the robot or whatever, the bot drafts for you, and they beat him out. So it shows you there's no logic whatsoever. I lost my game last week. I don't want to talk about fantasy football too much, but I lost my game last week. I had the best week I've ever had. But the team I played just also happened to have a monster week. A lot of it's luck. But let's get into it, all right?
Okay.
Clyde, you take over now. We're going to talk about our locks of the week, our upset picks of the week, because there's some good games this week and there's some real stinkers.
There are. And clearly we have – it's like we were talking about with the NFL, specifically with after what happened last week. We have a lot of teams that are 2-2, 500, maybe some fluky teams. Looking at you, Atlanta. So let's go into our.
Do you have the records first?
I do have the records first. I do.
Where do we stand? Because we're going to continue to keep our records.
Okay, right. But how do you factor me in this? Because this is my first time doing this.
Well, you're Larry.
Yeah,
okay, I'm picking for Larry.
Yeah,
okay,
you're picking for Larry.
If I lose, don't blame me.
So we will pay you to throw some games.
Yes, please do. Because Larry actually had the best week of everyone last week. Larry went. If I can find it right here real quickly, Larry went 10-6. Last week.
Wow.
Well, I went 5-11, and Jeff went 7-9 from his picks.
I believe that was a proxy. That was not me.
No. I actually took your picks from the from your post every week.
I was going to lean on that.
I figured that.
You can't hide from that.
Yeah,
Jeff.
You can't hide from that. So overall records going into this weekend is Larry now currently in the lead with a 30-32 record. Jeff, you are second at 27-35, and I am pulling up the rear at 26-36. My imminent demise has already begun. So let's get into this week's slate of games, guys. So I want to get into specifically first. I want to talk about, Jeff, your lock of the week.
The lock of the week. Okay, I'm prepared for that.
Let's go.
We talked a little bit about the Lions, Panthers. I think the Panthers are going to get trucked in this game. I'm not a Panthers believer. I'm sorry. I watched them against the Saints. The Saints dominated them. They barely beat the Bills. They didn't even score a touchdown in that game, I don't think. I don't know how they beat New England in New England. It just shows you how crazy the NFL is. But duplicating that performance, going up to Detroit against a very good balanced team in Detroit, against a very good quarterback. And the Panthers, as you know, Herbie, they play a lot of zone. They play a lot of cover 2 zone. Really good quarterbacks like Drew Brees can pick that thing apart because they don't get great pressure. Drew Brees riddled them. I think Matthew Stafford will do the same. And I don't see Carolina as being a good turf team. You know, they play outdoors. They get a lot of they like that kind of game. I don't see them on this fast track competing at all. But then I didn't think they would compete with New England, and we saw what happened. But I like that as my lock of the week.
I think that's a pretty darn good game there.
That is.
And here's what's also happening with the Panthers. I think we're starting to find out, and we all knew how important Greg Olsen was to that offense, but not having him absolutely hurts. Is Kelvin Benjamin going to play? I mean, obviously Benjamin hurt his knee against the Saints.
He's back.
So, but a lot of that, and then now you're on the road, and Detroit always tends to be one of those underrated teams until you play them and you get to see what they're doing.
Yep.
I like that pick there.
All right. Do you have a strong feeling one way or the other for any game?
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to New York, baby. I'm going to take the 0-4 Los Angeles Chargers versus the 0-4 New York Giants. The lock of the week is somebody has to win this game.
I appreciate that so much. I do.
I am going to go with the Giants at home. These guys, they came into this year, they're thinking they're a playoff team, or at least they're going to contend for a postseason berth, but now they're really, really way behind. They cannot lose this game at home against in my opinion, a terrible Chargers team. The Giants are going to win this game.
Wow, I don't know. I think the Giants are just as bad. That offensive line, I mean, are you serious?
It's a bad team.
I'm serious.
I know you're serious, but you're right. Somebody has to win. Whoever loses suddenly challenges the Cleveland Browns in the Suck for Sam sweepstakes for Sam Darnold. We're assuming he's going to be the first pick in the draft. I don't think the Browns would take him. Maybe they would. I don't know if they like Deshaun Kaiser that much, but somebody's going to be in line, the loser of that game, for the number one pick early on, because if they don't win this game, you start looking at the schedule, there's a lot better teams coming up.
Odell Beckham should be back to 100% for this game, I believe.
He should be, yes.
He should be getting closer, because I remember they were at the start of the season, they said it's going to take him at least 6 weeks to heal.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we're right on the cusp there.
And he played pretty well. He seemed like he got a lot of meaningful snaps last week. Still wasn't enough for the Giants to get the win, which, if this is your lock of the week, I cannot wait to hear about your upset. But for me, we are going to stay in the AFC. The Steelers, which are an 8-point favorite against the Jaguars. This is going to be an ugly, stodgy game, but I have no doubts in my mind that the Steelers will absolutely trounce the Jaguars. I don't think the Jaguars have any – they are in a boat with no paddle.
This is the team that beat Houston at Houston.
Right. And, again, let's talk about where the rest of the NFL is.
And killed Baltimore over in Wembley Stadium.
Which – we're going to talk about that in the second when we get to depth. I still think the Steelers are absolutely going to – they won't steamroll because they can't, and they're going to have to get past this whole Antonio Brown situation, which I'm going to double dip here. My fantasy player of the week is going to be AB, Antonio Brown. I think he is going to be that dude this week after last week. Let's go. Give me some points. But before we get to that, we're going to now get into our upset picks of the week. Herbie. Give me who should be on upset alert right now.
I don't know what the Vegas line is right now.
Ooh, depending on what it is, I can find it.
Okay. We have that.
Seahawks and the Rams.
We definitely have that.
The Rams are a 1-point favorite.
Oh, well then I can't say that's an upset then, because I was actually gonna look at the Rams there, because when you look at the Seahawks, I'm just going off of reputation and people are thinking, are the Rams for real?
The Rams are 3-1.
If the Vegas odds makers are giving them 1 point, then I can't say that's going to be an upset.
Yeah, it's not an upset.
How about I go this route? I'm going to go to a Sunday night football game, a team that I previously covered, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs have been rolling.
They have.
They've looked absolutely good.
I don't like where you're going.
Very good schedule. But they've always, ever since I covered them, they always had a letdown early in the year. I think this is it. I think they're primed to lose against Deshaun Watson, coming off of how many touchdowns? Granted,
5.
Granted, the Chiefs' defense is for real. They're a stout defense. But I'm going to go with an upset pick here. I'm going to take the Texans at home against the Kansas City Chiefs.
I like that pick. I think that's a good pick, because I think Kansas City's due at some point.
Yep.
Just how the NFL works, right?
Yeah.
You play a bunch of these close games. Eventually things kind of play against you. And I think Houston has to be buoyed by Deshaun Watson, by what they've done so far. So I like that pick. My upset pick of the week, and this is not a huge upset by any means, but I like the 49ers to finally get a win for Kyle Shanahan. They're 0-4. They're playing at the Colts. I just don't believe in the Colts at all. The 49ers have been competitive. Look, they lost at Seattle by 3. They lost to the Rams by 2.
Yeah.
And then they lost at Arizona last week by 3. So they've lost 3 games by a field goal or less. I think they're finally going to break through. I don't think they're as bad as their record. So give me the Niners getting points at Indianapolis.
I think that's a really good pick, just simply because I think you're right. I think with a lot of the other games that we've seen, the Niners are just right there, but they just haven't been able to pull it all together. My upset, we're going to Monday Night Football. The Mitchell Trubisky show is about to start. Finally, after way more weeks of not having it, the Mike Glennon show, we just need to shut it down. So my pick is the Bears, which there is no line I can see on this game. The Bears upsetting the Vikings at home on Monday night. That's my pick. But with AB, I just think he's going to have a breakout game, because they are going to target him more than they have targeted him. Even though he's still on pace for what he got last year, I think this is going to be the week that they target him, just because of
Ezekiel Elliott. Speaking of being overdue,
yeah,
he's due a big game. They play the Packers in Jerry World. And the Packers, while I think they've got a quality team overall, they're a little weak in the run defense. I think Ezekiel Elliott's going to run all over them, especially in the second half. Doubt something?
Yeah, my fantasy pick of the week is going to be Daenerys Targaryen teaming up with Jon Snow to help out the North. Okay, I'm kidding, everyone.
No, he's not. I told him to say it.
I will say, look, even though I don't like fantasy, I used to do it years ago. And one of the things I've learned a long time ago, decade ago at least, that's the last time I played fantasy football, was you ride the hot hand. Todd Gurley for the Los Angeles Rams has been scorching hot.
Good call, man.
I don't care what kind of defense he's playing, you play him. So Gurley is the fantasy stud of the week.
It's a good call, man. I really, really like that pick.
I do too.
You're absolutely right. That's such a good pick. The Rams, which I don't...
Sorry, yep.
At this point, especially if they win this week, do the Rams now become a contender? I guess that's a question that we'll have to talk about. Do they become a team that we're talking about now? That could be a team that, has put it together finally.
Well, we'll find out. I'm sure all of our listeners will weigh in and let us know where we erred, but those are our NFL picks of the week. You can weigh in with us on the Duncan Holder Facebook page and let us know where we messed up. And we'll take one final break here for the top of the hour, and we will come back and wrap up this great action-packed show right here on Sports 1280, NOLA.com, the iHeartRadio app. We're Duncan Holder.
Someone has to win that game.
Friday, for thanks to Adam
Giants and
Text quarter to Adam 1 for your chance
The
to
lock
win.
of the week.
That's
Someone has
AOM
to
and
win.
Number 1.
The good part is that's so true.
As a small business owner, you make every dollar count.
Giants at
So
home.
what could you do with
Ship
$10? Go to Vista
2 minutes.
500.
What else y'all got going on for this last segment?
Nothing really. We'll just kind of wrap it up.
Okay.
At Vistaprint, your satisfaction is absolutely guaranteed. So it's never been easier to turn 500 strangers into connections. Just visit Vistaprint.com and use promo code 9000
get your
at
thoughts
checkout.
on the Saints
That's Vistaprint.com.
before we go
promo
off.
code
Just kind of, you talked a little bit about being 2-2,
There's a season for everything.
but I think
and right now,
get you to expound a little bit
save
on
up
that.
to 30% on appliances season at the Home Depot with special buys
We
on
talk so much
innovative
LSU.
appliances that do more. Like a GE high efficiency
You know what, they're rightfully
washer
so,
and
because the
electric
Saints
dryer.
aren't on bottom.
Your
The Saints are on
clothes
a
get
bottom.
cleaner
I know.
without the damage.
A lot of people are
and
up
they're
in
just
arms over the loss to
$586 each.
That
Save
is also true.
$425 on the pair. Savings are in season with up to 30% off appliances at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. While supplies last, U.S. only, gas dryer extra, see store.
Robert
Crap
O'Shea's
I got
enjoying
when,
it.
how much crap I got when K-State lost to Vanderbilt. And then the following week, I just fired off text messages to everybody else who was ragging on me about that.
And select
Troy,
Arizona
huh?
booties for her for $34.99. Plus, save an additional 50% off clearance prices already reduced by 60 to 80%. And get an extra $10 off with your coupon. Hurry in now. JC
That's so fair.
From valid 10, 5
So
to 10
fair.
Levi's and other brands.
Gotta
excluded
take
from
it.
coupon. Clearance selections vary by store while supplies last. Savings off regular and original prices. Intermediate markdowns may have been taken. See store or
All right, so I'm a Kansas State grad. You're an LSU grad.
Knowledgeable
been a good
and
week.
professional
No, it hasn't.
staff and teachers. Then
Not
consider
good at all.
Paul L. Dunbar School.
As long as they
Serving
keep Tom
students from
Jurich on, I'm okay with
pre-kindergarten to the
everything.
8th grade,
They let Tom
Dunbar
Jurich
provides
go.
students with access to brand
They
new
won't be getting any more
state-of-the-art
money from me.
facilities and teachers who are dedicated to
Not
their
that I
success.
am
Find
the
out
big
more.
booster in
Go
the program.
to enrollnola.org.
Only the best athletic director in the country. Might end up down here.
Download the McDonald's app and get a free large soft drink with any purchase
They
every
would
week.
crawl.
Dunk and Holder now. Josh Innes next at noon on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
Man, what a great Friday. What you gonna do the rest of the day, Herbie?
I have to go back and write.
You gotta get. What do you? Are you working? You're actually working?
Yes, I have to do a
Yeah,
story.
some of us have to continue to work here, Jeff. Some of us
everybody
have
had
a desk to go to that we're going to just stay
Not
at for
everybody
at
had
least
a
another
3-day
6 hours.
weekend. At New Orleans, you got to become more of a New Orleanian. In New Orleans, the weekend starts about noon on Friday. You basically take off the rest of the afternoon. You go down to Galatoire's, and then you merge all the way into the the Friday night dinner. You stay at the same table, and you eat the same meal that you had for lunch for dinner. That's how it works here.
So it's kind of like Europe. I like that. I
Yes,
like that vibe.
it's very
I
much
that
like
vibe.
Europe.
Right. That's why our entire 32nd floor here is stark empty. No one at their computers working. Jeff Duncan.
I have the weekend off, and I'm going to take advantage of that.
You better.
I will take in the Tulane-Tulsa game tomorrow. I'm looking forward to that. If Tulane can get this win, man, they're going to have some momentum. Willie Fritz's program is going in the right direction. they're actually favored in that game. I think they're favored by 4 points.
4 points.
They moved the kickoff up, so everybody remember to get out to Ullman Stadium a little bit early. Saints, obviously, in the middle of a bye week. Lots of players, I think, probably taking some time away, getting with the family. So one chance you've got an early bye week, the first bye week on the schedule. So, Herbie, you mentioned earlier they have to feel good about themselves. They start 0-2. They're now 2-2. Depending on what happens with some of their NFC South competition this weekend, I still think in the NFC no one's run and hid from the rest of the competition. So they must feel good about where they're at in the standings. But not only that, they should be getting Terran Armstead back. They should be getting Willie Snead back and potentially Delvin Breaux back at some point. They've managed this crisis, if you want to call it that, 0-2 crisis, fairly well as a coaching staff.
They handled it very well. And the fact that they've been able to compensate for those injuries. When it comes to Breaux, he's not eligible to come back at the earliest until week 9. But, you have to spend at least 6 weeks on injured reserve. Then you have to practice for 2 weeks, be evaluated. So the earliest that the Saints can elevate him to the active roster is week 9. But Snead's going to be a huge part of this. I had an opportunity to talk to Curtis Johnson this past week, and he had mentioned one of the things that they're missing the most with Snead in the roster is his ability to do everything. And the third down presence. Brandon Coleman has 2 touchdowns on the year, but he's also being asked to do a lot of the things that Willie Snead normally does. And what Curtis Johnson tells me also is that it's been a combined effort to replace Willie Snead because of everything that he does underneath. But getting Snead back is going to be huge. Getting Armstead back potentially will be huge because now you have the opportunity to settle the offensive line and not have so many moving pieces that they've done through these first 4 games.
Yeah, I think they've done a really good job as a staff tinkering with the defense too.
Correct.
There was all kinds of breakdowns in those first 2 games, and Dennis Allen and his staff, whatever they've done, now I know they're not playing against the level of competition that they saw in the first 2 games, but whatever they've done has worked. And you have to give them credit. I mean, look, they lost Sterling Moore. Mm-hmm. They don't have Delvin Breaux, as we mentioned. They've had a number of other guys go out.
Lattimore with concussion.
Lattimore was out. They were playing guys that they just activated off the practice squad, and now they've lost the rookie Alex Anzalone at linebacker. They traded away Stephon Anthony. There's been a lot of moving parts on that side of the ball, and they've managed to kind of piece it together the last few weeks.
We're going to find out exactly where this Saints team is when they come off of the bye because they've got back-to-back very tough matchups against the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. Both of those teams right now entering Week 5 are at 3-1. I think if you're a Saints fan, you're happy if you split that. If you come out of those 2 games 1-1, perfect, because now you're setting yourself up for the rest of the year. I will say, when you looked at the schedule when the schedule first came out, we always knew the first 4 games were going to be tough. And then we saw the Lions and Packers back-to-back games. We're like, well, that's also going to be another brutal stretch. But then all of a sudden, supposedly it does ease up. But, I would say this. After watching Washington the other night against the Chiefs, that's a pretty tough defense.
Yeah, it is.
That's a pretty tough defense. The Bills all of a sudden are 3-1. I remember when the schedule came out, I was like, well, that should be an easy game.
That's a good
for the
defense.
Saints too. Yeah. The Jets, who knows what the Jets are? I can't. Look, the Jets knocked me out of my survivor pool because I always was like, any team playing the Jets, I'm picking the opponent.
You didn't believe in Josh McCown.
I didn't believe in him.
So. Rightfully so, but I didn't think they would win the games they've won either.
But I think if the Saints do come out of these next 2 games at 1-1, they should set up well for the rest of the season because you got to remember the month of December, 4 of those 5 games are against NFC South opponents. You just got to get there.
And I think they've got to get back to making the Superdome a hostile environment. I mean, they lost their only game there this season. They lost a lot of games there last year. This thing needs to kind of start getting cranked up again because that can make a big difference for them if they get the dome back rocking. And I think we'll see a little of that against the Lions next week because they've won 2 in a row. People are buying back in, if they will.
Yep.
And I think the dome could be a home field advantage for this team going forward.
I guess pretty much a note to end on, especially for this week. Larry gave his first quarter grades after the first 4 games. I mean, he broke it down, but overall, I'd love to get you guys' takes on if you had to give him a grade. What would you give him? A, B, C, so on, from what you've seen from the first 4 games?
I'd give them a B, considering all the losses they've had and the fact that they started 0-2 and the quality of competition. So.
I agree with a B. The first 2 games were horrible. Next 2 games really gives you a reason for optimism. So a B.
Like it.
I like it. We end
40 seconds.
in the the show on a very positive note. Herbie, thanks for sitting in,
man.
pinch hitting.
Great job.
Had some fun.
Excellent job in his first debut in the co-host seat. And Clyde, you have a great weekend.
You too as well, sir.
And we will be back here on Monday when Larry Holder rejoins the program. And you can follow us on, you can get our show on SoundCloud, on Facebook, on YouTube Live. If you hadn't listened to it today, and you can also obviously listen on the iHeartRadio app. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great weekend. This is Duncan Holder signing off for iHeartRadio, NOLA.com, Sports 1280.
If you're over,
peace out,
listen
YouTube.
Carefully. Do you have trouble remembering?
All right, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, man.